Hello and welcome to another episode of the IMMP Podcast from the Inter-Millennium Media Project. My name is Matthew Porter.
And I'm Ian Porter.
I'm his dad, he's my son, and I make him watch movies and television and other media from way back in the 20th century when I was a kid. And we're going back to the late 70s this week.
To the desolate past.
The lawless wasteland that was 1979.
Exactly. And the most fearsome thing in all of this ancient time of 79, Australians.
Well, last year for the summer, we took a road trip with movies like The Gumball Rally and Smokey and the Bandit. And this year we decided to take another road trip, and it ties in with things that are in theaters right now. So we're going back to take a look at the original Mad Max.
Oh my goodness. It's been so long since you showed me this movie.
It has been a while.
Because for a long time there, if I remember correctly, you and I would sometimes have like a movie night, and we'd like get a pizza and we'd watch something, usually a Godzilla film.
Right.
But one time you got a copy of Mad Max from the library, and we watched that instead. And it's so odd to see the original Mad Max knowing all the later stuff now, because it's such a different experience.
It is. There's something about going back to the original Mad Max that is like going back to the original Fast and the Furious movie, when it was a TV movie level cop drama about gearheads stealing DVD players. Here, it's a cop movie. Mad Max is a fairly straightforward cop movie with some really innovative action.
And yet I would not call it its way of showing the story of Max Rockatansky, who does have the coolest last name.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
The way they show it does not feel like a whole lot of other urban or even suburban or other. It doesn't feel structurally to me like other cop movies or other movies of that type. I would definitely say that the subject matter is, but even from the first Mad Max, the Mad Max franchise's kind of interesting underlying nature was shown. Mad Max is a series about mythology.
Yes, and you make a good point there in that it takes the components of a police drama and tells a very different kind of story with it, mythologizes it, and heightens it.
Yes. There's a lot more that I would call Mad Max, the original, in terms of comparison to something like the 2021 version of The Green Knight. Where it's got that kind of exploration of a land that is changing. It's also very similar to the Conan movies we saw on our Christmas with Conan, where it's got this mythology of a grand past and a single person reclaiming power from it and facing the changes of the world. There's this wasteland wanderer as knight of what has been kind of aspect going on.
That's an interesting point. And we see that, I think, pretty clearly in the original Mad Max when he's a police officer with a badge, and he's got a boss in a police station, and he's got a position in this society, even as this society is falling apart. And
he has all of these things, but it is post-apocalypse. Just recently. Or at least it is mid-apocalypse, at least. Things are deteriorating.
It's kind of mid-apocalypse, and there are so many essays and so many attempts to figure out the sequence of events in the entire Mad Max universe. The one, and I for reasons you started talking about, I think, it doesn't matter that much, but this seems to be the most likely explanation that I've read is that this is after warfare in places like the Persian Gulf have disrupted the world energy supply, which has disrupted the world economy, but before the nuclear war that eventually leads to.
Yes.
And that brings about the something most weird about Mad Max, the original, is how normal certain things are.
Yeah. You can go get an ice cream.
Yeah, there are still shops and diners and caravan holidays and still a police department. It's like Australia being removed from a lot of what's happening in the world is still holding on to normal life of the 20th century better than most places are probably. But they know it's slipping away, and Max is one of the people who's trying to keep that from slipping too fast.
There's still this sense of normalcy, but everything is crumbling in such a way that the bandits out in the wasteland are more powerful and are growing in number faster than the police are dealing with. The people who are still around in terms of on this force are making modifications and scraping together, and they are poorly funded, but they're also kind of becoming one of the gangs they're fighting as we see them continue.
Oh, that's an interesting point, because, yeah, we do still have bureaucrats and politicians and lawyers in courts.
We do.
And they're kind of desperate to keep Max from quitting. And I guess that's a sign of the fact that there are so few people willing to be police anymore. And those who do don't necessarily survive the job very long. And yeah, they're just another gang trying to maintain a certain degree of power.
Right. They've got some connection to the past there, but their police commissioner, as we see him, I'm going to say a weird thing. The outfit he is wearing, as we see him at various points, changes a little.
Oh, you're talking about Fifi, McAfee, Max's boss? Yes.
He goes from an outfit that looks like the police chief to an outfit that is starting to look like the early stages of some of the crazy shoulder padded power suits of intimidation that the gangs are wearing. And his thing is he's getting more and more energetic about people need their heroes back. Max, don't leave. We need our heroes. Meanwhile, we see other members, the tech people that are fixing up Max's supercharged special black pursuit vehicle, which is such an iconic thing. It's almost Max's Excalibur.
Yes.
But the people who are modifying it keep adding more crazy stuff and adding a little bit more and push further. That decline is shown in real time as the structures he's defending become the structures he's fighting to some extent. The line blurs.
And you're right about that V8 interceptor of Max's. It is his mythical weapon. It is his legendary weapon. And yet it's not what he gains through some achievement. It's what is used to keep him in the job that he wants to quit. They bait him with candy, as one of the bureaucrats tells Fifi.
Exactly.
And is it me or does Fifi have a very distinct jet black kind of vibe from Cowboy Bebop?
Yes,
he's this tall, strong guy. We see him tending his plants at some point. Definitely a jet black kind of guy.
Oh my goodness, I hadn't put together how much. And in terms of I'm slightly unhinged, but I'm highly effective, there's a little bit of Spike Spiegel in Max Rockatansky.
A little bit. There's a little of Spike in Max. There's a little of Spike in Max's friend Goose, who's an irreverent, wants drinks and girls and to hang out and enjoy life, and the adrenaline rush of the job is what keeps him there versus the feeling of duty plus the chance to get to play with cool cars that keeps Max there.
Exactly. Max is definitely a gearhead in that sense.
Yeah.
He is. We see him do tune-up bits to the supercharged V8 Pursuit Special himself, as well as bring it to get full repairs and upgrades.
Yeah, he really understands Barry, the mechanic for the police force, because they bond over that kind of thing. And
they've got wide open long roads of Australian outback to protect. And that means that there's these long, wide areas for chase scenes and where biker gangs are running rampant. And we start out with this fiery crash and chase thing going on with Knight Rider.
Yeah, the first 12 minutes of this movie is this long action sequence with this pursuit of Knight Rider, somebody who, the first thing we learn over the radio is that he's killed a police officer and stolen the police vehicle and is screaming down the road. And we see, it seems like every guy who's left in the police, the MFP, the Main Force Patrol, every person who's left there is trying to intercept this guy, and it's not going well.
And they have to call in Max. Mad Max, as they say. That's not just like a thing he gains. He has been Mad Max from the beginning. That is his nickname from the Force.
Right.
And that already, when everyone else is unable to get it, but there's someone that they're calling the best, but he's mad.
Mm-hmm. And everybody else is driving patrol vehicles, and he's the one who's got the interceptor. He doesn't yet have that black V8 yet, but he's got an interceptor. He's a specific kind of driver they call in when they need him.
Mm-hmm. And this setup is so important because Max managing to defeat Knight Rider is the impetus for the entirety of the show, of the story. The entire showdown that comes later, to some extent, or at least it's what's said to be.
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. Because Knight Rider is a follower of somebody, and we hear this first from Knight Rider, the crazy, drugged up guy behind the wheel of this stolen car, talking about Toe Cutter, and do you see me now, Toe Cutter? And there's a lot of the way Knight Rider talks that we see echoed in later Mad Max movies more than I had realized. This idea of being seen and being witnessed, and that is your connection with the leader you follow.
Mm-hmm. And the concept of this personal mythologizing by vehicle and outfit, and that there's so much attempted, like there's this questing for glory. It's like, I'll do the thing I might not survive, but I'll have been seen doing it and remembered.
Yes, right.
And
I know I won't live, so I should be remembered.
Exactly. And so Knight Rider dies, but we soon see, as we watch Max kind of introduce us to the rest of the Force and everything else, we see Toe Cutter and his gang. And they are intimidating other people with his name was the Knight Rider. Remember him.
Yes, and Knight Rider was important to Toe Cutter.
Yes, but there is this ritual of memory going on.
Yes.
This kind of fear of the loss of the person as an idea as much as anything else.
Right. When you remember him when you look at the night sky. Again, that mythologizing impulse you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. And all of the other people in the gang are all for this. And it feels like it's because they each have their own. Like, there's one who will be remembered when you see the night sky. There's one who will be remembered when you see the dawn, or things like that. There's this idea that they all have claimed a part of something out there.
Right.
And that will be how they live forever.
Uh-huh. And we're going to honor Toe Cutter the way we want to be honored when our time comes.
Exactly. So...
we'll honor Knight Rider, I mean.
Yeah, we'll honor Knight Rider the way we want to be honored. And that's where we get to see the gang has this tight-knit and this own personal method of approaching reality and approaching their future as this memory going forward. Meanwhile, Max is all working for a group that is talking about reclaiming what had been, bringing back heroes of the past, keeping the order and structure we used to have and preventing it from falling. It is really past versus future. Yeah. In that sense.
And that's the big tension we see between Max and his boss, Fifi. Fifi wants to give people back their heroes. He wants to maintain and restore the world that they knew. And Max is recognizing, I'm no different than the guys out there. I just have a bronze badge to show that I'm supposedly a good guy. We're just different gangs out there on the roads. And in some ways, Max is coming to grips with the reality that some of the bureaucrats and that Fifi and maybe Goose don't really understand.
But Max has something to fight for and a reason to fight on the side of the law separate from the ideologies of either side.
Right.
And that's the fact that he has a wife and son.
Mm-hmm. He's got a family. He has this domestic retreat. He's the one who you would think would be looking to protect and preserve the kinds of things Fifi's trying to protect and preserve. And Max values this so highly, but he kind of despairs about his ability to keep the world safe for them.
And this is this push and pull that underlies the entire story.
Yeah.
I will say Mad Max, the first film, does not look like a Mad Max film.
Yeah.
As much as I expected.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about mythology and everything else, the Mad Max franchise has a look now.
It does, and that doesn't go back to the first movie very much.
The first movie looks like someone shot sets of The Fog from the wrong angle sometimes. It's like, this is a drier thing, but there's like every time I see like 2x4s propping something up, I'm like, you're on the wrong side of your set. I've seen this cinematography. Go over there, reset up your camera. Because the way it shows it, the way it's designed, there's a little bit of the rusty broken down, and there's not a lot of green.
Mm-hmm.
This is a green light movie. But stylizing wise, it hasn't cashed in on all its stylizing chips yet.
No, it wasn't a very high budget movie, and what budget they had, they put mostly into stunts. So the world looks very normal in so many ways compared to later Mad Max movies. And that's the biggest disconnect going back to this one, is that it looks like small town Australia off the highways.
They are able to do a little bit of the things you'll see in future ones. The fact that the Captain Fifi has plants,
yes,
as a sign of him being a person who is powerful. Like green is a sign of power in the Mad Max franchise going forward, and him being this person tending to plants.
Yeah.
They've got a little bit of that visual indicator already establishing, but it's not so stark yet that it punches you like it does in later things.
Right. I hadn't thought about this until you just brought it up, and that is Fifi with his plants. That indicates he has a certain amount of power, that he can have the space and time to do this. But it's also such a great symbol of the fact that he's trying to preserve something that's going away.
Yes.
He wants things to grow in a place where nothing's really growing anymore. He wants to bring back plants and give people back their heroes. It's all part of the same impulse. He doesn't want to let go of what we have had.
Exactly.
And he has the power to do something about that, be it get a great car built to keep Max from quitting, or fill a room with plants and spend some of his time tending them.
He's a man with power leveraging it. And so he actually slots in with other characters from future stories of Mad Max in ways that are unexpected.
Yes.
But we also get to see the biker gangs don't have as flashy uniforms, and there's some metal bits and everything else, but they are much more just bikers.
They could have been in a 60s biker movie. Very much.
They could have. If they came back from the dead, they could have been members of... Oh, I'm trying to remember. Was the group a different name in that movie?
Which?
Psychomania.
Oh, the Psychomania. Yes, the Living Dead.
The Living Dead. I thought so. I'm like, I don't think that was the group name, but yeah,
No.
still. Like, they could have been in there.
Yes.
Although,
Well, the Living Dead dressed a little better. They were a little more mod.
They were. And I admit, Psychomania would have absolutely thrown the philosophy of this biker gang out the window. It's like, remember me. I'm right over here.
Yes, and if you don't remember me, I'll remind you.
Yeah, it didn't stick. And that kind of ruins it for them, but
Right.
it works.
Yep.
But it's like, they look relatively normal compared to that. They're just being aggressive jerks.
Yes.
on the road, and that's all they are.
And
if anything, the stylization is in the police force.
Yes, and this movie does. I mean, it is a rough movie to watch at times, and the bad guys are really, really horrible. And we see
they
murder
get worse and
and
worse.
sexual assault and all these horrible things. They do set us up to absolutely despise the bad guys and want them to be destroyed.
Yes.
Which is part of what makes this movie an example of a potentially dangerous kind of pro-cop propaganda, where the only thing keeping us safe is police. And the only way police can really be effective in keeping us safe is if they are no longer accountable to the laws they're supposedly upholding. That's basically the story of this movie, and that's a problem.
That is. They do an excellent job showing the gangs getting worse and worse, because they start out with one of those people having a murder, but it's only the one. But then we wind up with all of them cornering Goose, Max's partner, and lighting him on fire.
Yeah.
And he's burned to death. And that's really pushes Max over the edge. And Max wants to immediately go out and kill them.
Well, that's what gets Max to say he's going to quit finally and go off on his vacation with his family. Because Fifi says, don't quit, take a couple of weeks.
I took it that he was going to quit and go kill those men.
Maybe.
It's like, I'm going to go quit so that you can't tell me not to. You take a few weeks of vacation time and then see about that.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, I took it that he was snapping, and this was a way to keep him from doing so.
Right, and spending time with his family kind of grounds him again. And it's later when he actually loses the family.
Right,
again,
because
rough part of the movie to watch. That is what
horribly rough
he's got
part.
nothing to lose. He is going to devote everything he can to destroying Toe Cutter and his gang.
But we've got this. There's this entire scene of the way the gang, with Goose trapped, lights him on fire.
Yeah.
And then we see them chase down Max, still for revenge about Knight Rider, and chase down and hunt his family.
Right.
And the family part is really where we get to see a lot of how the world is still trying to function, how it's limping along. Shops are still open, places, they can go down to the beach to get an ice cream. Right. We never see how much things really cost nowadays. We don't get to see how many other people are there. A lot of empty places, but the places still are running.
Right.
To some extent.
Still sort of a functional small town economy in a society.
Yeah. It feels like everyone is in the off season from tourism.
Yes, that's a good point. No place is crowded. There aren't lots of people. Everything is just sort of limping along.
Right. And we also get to see the fact that Max's wife, Jessie, can keep up with him.
She's tough.
She's tough. She's not mechanically as quick as him, but she literally takes down a gangster, one of these bikers, when they try to get at her. She is on top of it, and she's a pretty good driver.
Yes. And that's a weird scene, because it's one of the things that bugs me a little bit, is that a pivotal point in this movie is just a total coincidence. Yes, Max is out there and he is thinking about quitting, while Toe Cutter and his gang have targeted Max for revenge. And Max says early on, I'll just add it to my list of revenge threats. So they're hunting Max, but his wife happens to bring their kid for an ice cream to a place where the biker gang happens to be hanging out at the time.
Yeah.
They don't figure out where she's going to be. They happen to cross paths. And when they have this confrontation, I don't think the gang even knows this lady has any connection to Max.
They're just kind of being awful, as they are.
Yep.
And assaulting a lady. And then when they realize, oh, she's fighting back. Oh, she's running to some guy. Doesn't he look familiar? Oh, no.
Right. And then they have reason to target her more than just revenge over being evaded in their attack.
Mm-hmm. But we also do get to meet one of the most badass characters in the entire Mad Max franchise, which is Mae Swayze. Grandma, I have a shotgun and I'm tired of all of you.
Yes.
One of the best characters in the entirety, because it takes something for, in the middle of these big dramatic moments, for the Deus Ex Machina that stops a showdown being Grandma showing up on the side with a shotgun going, "Get out of here." And the fact that the entire gang is going, "We don't like guns, please don't."
I think it's a supply of tough old ladies like her that is helping Australia hang on at least as much as a supply of cops like Max and Goose.
Exactly. But my goodness, they kind of make an escape, but it actually causes Max to be separated from Jesse and their kid.
Yeah. And
that's where the van that his wife Jessie and Sprague, I think they call the kid.
Yes, I never quite got that name. I don't know if it's Australian slang or endearment of some kind or what.
According to Wikipedia, it is Australian slang for child.
Okay.
So it's like calling it's like kiddo.
Okay.
Hey, Sprague.
It's a cool word. I like it.
Absolutely. But
I'm sorry, I just had to point out it fits with what you were saying before about the mythologization of all of this. Yes, he has a child. He has a kid. The kid's name is Kid.
Yes, because this one is being the saddest part of the film, the one that they cite the most as kind of the this is the Batman origin story. This is the moment in the alleyway.
This is the
for
fridge.
Max.
Yeah.
This is the fridge. This is when the biker gang runs down his wife and child.
Yeah.
Which is, they do such an excellent job of not showing it, just giving you that heartbreak.
We see the setup of it. We see Max's reaction, getting there moments later. It's a shot in a way that makes it less graphic than it could have been, and maybe more devastating than if it had been more graphic.
Exactly. And this is where Max finally, I want to say, snaps.
Yes. He marches into the police garage and takes the V8 Interceptor and hunts down Toe Cutter and his gang.
Well, he doesn't just take the Interceptor. He puts on his uniform.
True, but not the badge, does he? He doesn't put on the badge.
He puts on the uniform, not the badge, and steals the Interceptor without authority.
Yes.
He is wearing the symbol of being the hero that Fifi was trying to make him, and yet refusing the symbol that he works for the authority that gave him that.
He's claiming the power without accepting the authority.
Exactly.
And as he's doing that, as he's making the decision to do this, is one of the scenes that it seems it's a little bit too on the nose. We see him playing around with the kids with a monster mask before, and he's sitting there outside their house, literally looking at this monster mask, choosing, should I become the monster? Yes, I'll become the monster. He might as well put on the monster mask when he puts on the police gear again.
He might as well.
But he puts on all the black leather police gear, not the badge, and he goes and steals the Interceptor.
And then, with a sawed-off shotgun... No, he gets that in the fight, actually, doesn't he?
I guess so, yeah. He gets that from someone else.
But he drives out and confronts Toe Cutter and gang.
Mm-hmm.
And in a parallel to the chase at the beginning, this is this giant chase and run down and kills them one by one in this giant fight.
Right, and we get some road chase and action scenes that sort of mirror some of the ones we saw in those first 12 minutes of the movie, where he is pursuing various members of the gang and running them off the road or causing collisions. Finally gets Toe Cutter in this game of chicken where he's pursuing Toe Cutter, finally in this vehicle that's fast enough to catch him, and causes Toe Cutter to have a head-on collision with a Mack truck.
And Toe Cutter had made a member, Johnny, be the one to actually burn Goose.
Mm-hmm.
And the final moments of the film, which are so impactful, I say, is Max standing over Johnny caught in a vehicle. And Max hands him a hacksaw.
Yeah.
And gives him this...
Handcuffs him to this burning wreck.
Yeah, gives him this dark thing about you can cut through the handcuffs, you can cut through your own ankle.
Right, which is something that it goes back to Watchmen. It also goes to the movie Saw, and nobody that trope of you've got the saw, you make the decision. I don't think many people remember that it comes back to Mad Max.
Exactly. But Max walks away and the vehicle explodes.
Right.
And Max just killed Johnny in a parallel of how Toe Cutter made Johnny kill Goose.
Mm-hmm. He's flipped from justice to revenge.
Exactly. And there's such a perfect moment of this dark, like, Max is now loose.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the origin. We've seen what made this person. And we've seen the systems that were falling apart continue to crumble. And he kind of walks into the wasteland with nothing left.
And does that make him a symbol of everything finally collapsing? If he was one of the pillars that was keeping the world at least functioning, now he's gone? I don't know.
That's a question that is kind of left ambiguous.
Yeah. One detail that struck me on this viewing is we have this scene in the hospital before he snaps, before he puts back on the black leather and steals the interceptor. The doctor's working to save his wife's life. The child was DOA. But don't they say that Jess is horribly, horribly injured, but is alive and is likely to survive?
I don't remember.
I think they do. I think he just abandoned his wife when he snapped.
Does he? I thought she was in a coma. I thought she was like, she may never wake up, but she is.
Maybe. That may be. But still, that's very different. Like, he had a choice to be with her in case she needs him, or to go out and become this monster and exact revenge. And he chooses to become a monster and exact revenge. It shows how different his priorities become at that moment, how that total shift happens.
That's an interesting one.
And so we definitely see Max is not a perfect person. Even though Max he's the person we need is kind of the way the movie seems to present it. In a way that would become more prevalent in 90s comic books, maybe just from what I know reference-wise, Max is a anti-hero in a specific kind of flavor. Very much, very much. He's kind of Fifi's "Be careful what you wish for." You wanted to give people back heroes. This is not what you had in mind, was it, McAfee? Yeah. And there are some awful things about this movie too that need to be recognized. First of all, let's acknowledge Mel Gibson, his behavior and positions, a lot of awful stuff there that's out of scope for what we're talking about this movie from 1979, but I'm not going to ignore that. I want to acknowledge that. There's also some of the other things in this movie, like the over-the-top, not just gay-coded, but homosexual mannerisms and behavior on the part of bad guys. It's just presenting this as, this is how horrible these bad guys are. They're even kind of queer. Yeah, that's, you saw a lot of that going into the 80s, and it's so cringy, and it's so it's cheap and bad storytelling apart from everything else that might be offensive about that.
The number of times they have to point out that in the car with Knight Rider was his girlfriend.
Right. Yeah. Like what?
Because it's like
Knight Rider, the last heterosexual bad guy.
Exactly. It's like, because every time we can't have all these other guys talking great about this with him without always reminding everyone that his girlfriend was there, because you can't risk that being, it's like, it becomes painful in terms of the number of times they use that.
And later on, it becomes so clear how they're portraying Toe Cutter and his gang.
Yes.
And we see more of that as the Mad Max movies go on, but I think it was particularly badly done and badly used in Mad Max. But we're starting to mention how the series develops. I wonder if we're heading towards our final questions.
I think we might be.
Yeah.
So,
well, stay tuned for those final questions. But in the meantime, if you are enjoying the IMMP podcast and you want more, first of all, you can go to www.immproject.com, where you'll find all of our back episodes, including some bonus episodes. You can also support us on Patreon. You will find a link there. And on Patreon, not only will you be supporting the podcast, but you can get more bonus audio content. And if you join at the movie club level, you will get the occasional mystery DVD in the mail. And you can also support us by going to our shop if you like T-shirts and coffee mugs and fun things like that, delightful IMMP coffee mugs. And you can also contact us there. We would love to hear from you. You can use our contact page. You can find us on Discord. And we'd like to know, what do you think about the Mad Max movies? What do you think of this original movie compared to the way it develops later in the series? Let us know. And Ian, where can people find you?
I can be found as Item Crafting most places, be that itemcrafting.com, Item Crafting Live on Twitch, or Item Crafting at bluesky.social.
And you can find me at bymatthewporter.com. You'll find links to whatever I'm doing online. And that includes By Matthew Porter on YouTube, where you will find, among other things, the Draft House Diary videos, where I will review every visit to the Alamo Draft House cinemas. So, final questions. Mad Max from 1979, screen or no screen?
This is going to sound really weird. If you're a cinema fan, screen. But if you're a Mad Max fan, I almost want to say screen when you think you're done.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
The Mad Max franchise, with its aspect of mythologizing, this original movie is such a different thing. It is an origin story. But I saw this first, and I had to forget a lot of this movie for the other movies to hit me as hard as they did.
Oh.
And so I think that this is a great movie to throw in at a point when you want to... This is a period at the end of a sentence that you haven't yet seen the rest of.
Huh.
I feel like this movie is interesting and great, but it's great for some in terms of when it is, but it's not actually as tied to the rest of the franchise, style and theming wise, as it could be. And so it's a very different experience.
So are you thinking you approach the Mad Max series and then come back to this movie as a prequel?
Yes.
Like now you've seen these wild movies and the strange world in which they take place. Check out this prequel, which talks about where this guy came from.
That's the better way to see it, I think.
Interesting. That is a good way to approach this. That would definitely change the impact of this movie.
Exactly. And I don't think it has to be a screen then, but you can use it as a screening very, very well if you want to.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a situational screen.
Yeah, I would definitely say screen in a couple of different ways. If you're interested in the Mad Max movies, I would say screen. It's part of that. And your idea of treating it as a prequel and watching it later, I kind of like that. I got to give that some thought. Mm-hmm. Another context in which to watch this, and I would recommend screening it, is in the context of Australian cinema from that period of time. Because that late 70s, early 80s, we were in this stretch of 3 or 4, maybe 5 years in which Australian cinema was really powerful and really getting a lot of attention around the world. And we had movies like, in that time frame, like Breaker Morant and My Brilliant Career and other really, really attention-getting and well-made and fascinating Australian movies. And Mad Max is an odd example, stuck in the middle there. Like, this is not what people were making such waves about. Or this is not what was making so much waves and getting so much attention. And yet, because it was from Australia at that time, I think it got more global attention than it might have had it come out 6 years earlier or later. And,
Makes sense.
And yet, it it still represents a lot of the things that were fascinating about Australian movies at that time. So it's fun to see in that context as well, as different as it is from some of those other movies that got so much attention.
Yeah.
So I say screen and think about it in a few different contexts like that.
With you.
So this is another movie for which it's kind of weird to ask this next question, which is revive, reboot, or rest in peace? It's hard to think about this in terms of rest in peace, because if this had been the only Mad Max movie, nobody would talk about it much. Nobody would watch it much.
Yeah, it would be a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe some people would be fans, but it would not. It's the other things, it's the other cultural impacts of the later films that give this thing the momentum.
Right. It would just be another cult cop movie, action movie from the late 70s.
I have a movie that this movie makes me want to see.
Yeah?
That sounds odd because it's pulling from the opposite part of Mad Max than we usually get.
Okay.
I want a prequel. I know, I was just calling this a prequel, but if we're going to put this in context, I want a prequel that doesn't tell me it's Mad Max beforehand.
Okay.
Give me a romance story about a rookie cop and like a race car, like a driver or something. And we never realize until the end that his middle name is Maximilian and her name is Jessie. And you just run the everything's getting worse in the background light as a through line.
Oh.
Give me the romance in the pre-apocalypse and reveal at the end that this was Max and Jessie's falling in love. And suddenly you could have a whole lot of interesting with that. But it would be a very deft hand to get it in there, but I think it could be amazing.
That's fascinating, not only for the character development that you're describing, but to show us what happens when the world is turning into what it turns into. I can already think of some interesting decisions and plot points and things. Like, yeah, at some point, maybe he's got to decide, given what's happening globally, is he going to join the military? Is that where he's needed? Or now that he's fallen in love here, is he going to become a cop or remain a cop and help make his home safe for his family?
Exactly. That's the sort of thing where it's like, lean on the Max part and not the Mad for just one movie.
Right.
And like, you could make something very fascinating. But if I just say I'd love Mad Max sequels, I'm not talking about this movie. I'm talking about all the later movies are the ones I'm asking for sequels of. So if I'm asking for more of this, I have to lean into what this has special. And that's the connection back to the past, the history, the motivation aspects in a different way.
Right.
And so I'm kind of saying I'd love that other movie, but we get Mad Max already. It's fun. We don't need that. So
it really would be interesting, though, wouldn't it?
It would be.
It'd be so different from what we are seeing in all the other Mad Max movies.
Mm-hmm. And you could have these little bits that would hint at later things that would imply why things have gone how they are. I mean, you want to say, like, why are these Australian specific? Well, everything else is gone. You can make that more clear. In some ways, there's a little bit of mystery it would remove, giving us context. The same way, too much backstory, filling in too much removes room for other ideas. But it's an area they haven't played with in terms of the narrative of these stories.
Right. And you could still talk about that while staying sufficiently focused on these characters that you don't have to talk about geopolitics. You just have to talk about what do these characters know and think about geopolitics, and that's not the same thing. So I think there's room to do that without giving away too much.
I will say, this is Mad Max, the first film, is an interesting one in terms of the franchise because it does not do some of the playing with narrator or at least perspective that the later movies do. The later movies play around with concept as to how you're being shown this.
Yeah.
To some extent. Mad Max originally doesn't. That tool that the later ones figured out to use could have been applied to this movie, and make it more vague could be applied to other stories of that same sort and prevent them from solidifying things that you need uncertain for the kind of stories these tell.
Right.
So there's some things you can do with narrative and everything else that could help mitigate that, but yeah.
And there's a certain self-seriousness about the original Mad Max movie that we sort of lose in some of the later movies that you could come back to in that prequel you described. And
yes and no.
It comes down to the score as well. The way music is used in Mad Max. It's like, it's so on the nose. It's so, okay, this is the music sting for the halls of justice with its crumbling sign. Yes, thank you. And the third time you use that, we kind of get it. And yet it emphasizes, it's not even that it's effective on us as an audience. It's that it telegraphs what the filmmaker is trying to do. It's like, oh, this is this kind of scene. Can't you hear the music?
Yep.
But
my goodness.
You don't know that we'd be able to maintain that sort of self-seriousness in a prequel? Or you wouldn't want to?
I wouldn't quite want to.
Oh.
I'd want for that stylization to build. I'd want for it to be a slow crescendo from a movie that looks normal, and by the end you realize what it is.
Oh, not just the development of the characters into what we see in Mad Max, but also development of the filmmaking into what we see in Mad Max.
I literally don't want people to know this is a Mad Max film until like a week before, because I want it to be kind of a surprise. I want it to catch you off guard, like the world.
Yeah. Hollywood movie-making marketers would not allow that for a moment.
Would not allow that,
idea.
but still. But if you're going to do something, at least the idea, like, it starts out looking like honestly looking like the first Fast and Furious movies to some extent, and it turns into Mad Max. The filter gets deeper orange as the movie goes. Would be so good.
What I find myself thinking of now is the recent movie The Holdovers, of all things, which was shot to look like a mid-70s movie. I want now this Mad Max prequel to be made to look as if and feel as if it's a late 60s, early 70s road movie or romance or something like that.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then it turns into Mad Max is exactly what I'm hoping for. And that's where I'm like, if you're going to look at just the first movie and ask what else is there, that's what we've got. It starts here, it goes there. Where did it start? Go that amount of distance that way.
I'm imagining this kind of lighthearted rom-com, Rockatansky and Jess.
Exactly. And then it's like, did you hear? The race is canceled. What? There's no gasoline to run it. Oh, it's like that sort of moment could work.
At very least, somebody should make a trailer for Rockatansky and Jess, even if nobody ever makes the movie.
Oh, yes. Oh, please. If someone in our audience did that, I would be so excited. That would be amazing.
Yep. Well.
So, what's your thoughts in terms of revive, reboot, or rest in peace?
It's funny. If I were just watching this movie in isolation, didn't know it was part of a franchise or anything. I just said, somebody showed me this movie. Oh, do you want more of this? Do you want a revival or a reboot? I would have said, if I was looking at it decades later, a reboot would be interesting, because how we would view the collapse of a functioning society and economy, and what that would mean to both crime and the police forces. I would be interested in a reboot. I wouldn't necessarily need a revival. I wouldn't necessarily need another story about this character or these characters, unless the reboot turned out to be interesting in new ways. So I would have said reboot. I want this idea in this kind of setting told in a more modern way. But I wouldn't have been against the idea of sequels, because we do see Max is now a character with a very different sort of drive and with resources. What's going to happen next? And that's, I guess, kind of what we get. So I don't think this is the last we will see of Max, or the last we will talk about Max.
Nope, we've got more road trip to go, don't we?
Yeah, summer road trip is just getting started.
Yay, I'll pack snacks.
I'm going to miss all those Main Force patrol cars, though.
I will too. Those
And-
are cool vehicles.
You know, I have to tell you a little bit about how I saw this movie. Not the first time I saw it, but
Yes.
how I saw it most.
Okay.
I saw this movie probably on HBO a year or two after it came out. Delighted to see my initials on all these police cars.
And put that together.
And it was cool. I had read about it. This came out at a time when I was really, really interested in movies, but wasn't able to go out and see as many movies as I'd like to. It was kind of the same time as when Alien came out. So I was voraciously reading all the reviews I could find, and it sounded fascinating. And eventually I saw it on HBO. But then, when I was in college, just a couple of years later, I was running props for a production in our theater department. I was in the theater program at the time, and we were doing a stage adaptation of George Orwell's 1984.
Okay.
And it was in a black box theater, so it was one kind of set with different furniture we'd move in and out. And the only static things about the set were a wall with a sliding door, and mounted above that, high on the wall, was a television set, like a 20-inch black and white CRT television.
Okay.
Hooked up to a VCR or Betamax machine, and somebody had used an early camcorder to take a shot of an eyeball. That would be the loop that would be shown. That's Big Brother watching you from the telescreen in the stage play. But the guy who was running that part of the set, whenever we weren't actually rehearsing, whenever we were doing anything else in that theater, getting ready for this, he would put in a tape of Mad Max, usually with the sound down, and it would be playing on the telescreen on this set for our stage production in 1984. So I saw long portions of Mad Max over and over and over again in this very weird context. It was very surreal. This is set for 1984, watching loops of various parts of the Mad Max movie in black and white, usually with no sound. And that definitely has impacted the way I remember this movie.
Yeah. Knight Rider remembers you.
Yes.
The world. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about media, but it's always impacted by when and where and how we encounter it.
Exactly. Oh, goodness.
But this was fun to revisit. Again, as you said, this is one of those movies we watched together a while ago, but we took another look.
I took another look. It was an excellent time.
Yeah. And we will be back to look at more movies from the 20th century.
And in the meantime, go find something new to watch.